Hey everyone, and welcome to the Private Podcast, where we plug in and explore the intersection of privacy, human rights, technology, and democracy. I'm your host, Derek E. Silva, and today we have Julian Zawistowski. Julian is the founder of Golem, a decentralized marketplace for computing power, and I think we'll learn he's involved in far more, or interested in a lot of other things as well, because we were having a bit of a chat before we started recording here. Julian, thanks for taking the time to be here today.
Yeah. Hello, Derek. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. Let's touch off on your background. What's your background? Maybe your education, and what led you to working in the broadly in the technology space.
Oh, wow. That's pretty.
The origin
That's
story of Julian.
pretty. Yeah, yeah. The origin story. That's always difficult. So, long story short, I'm an economist by trade, and for many years I specialized in public sector economics. So I
Hmm.
did like a kind of public sector consultancy um, for public institutions. And that at some point turned out to be pretty close to like evaluating policies and thinking on how a system works.
Hmm.
And then pretty early, I think 2014, I came across like a very early Ethereum concept. And by then I was also moving a little bit more to software development with my consulting company. So we entered the space pretty early, and then I realized that the decentralized technologies are in fact more about economics than about tech, like because they work not because of the technology. Of course, they work because of the technology, but without underlying mechanism design, they wouldn't work. So
Right.
I find it like a very fascinating, and I also think that this is um, that has huge potential for changing like a lot of things, not only like the financial systems. So yeah, so that's the origin story.
Okay, fair enough. And tell us a little bit about Gollum and how it got started, if you don't mind.
Well, sure. Like that's disclaimer. I do not work actively on Golden Network anymore. I
Sure.
keep my fingers crossed, and I love people working on that. But I'm with Golden Foundation, so we try to have like a little bit more like a meta level on Golden ecosystem and GLM ecosystem. But yeah, I original idea was mine, and actually when I first learned about mining, proof of work, how it works, like my impression was like I think of many other practical people that this is like a huge waste of resources of electricity, but at the same
Yeah.
time it reminded me of one of the short stories by Stanisław Lem, so Polish science fiction writer, which is actually called not Golem 14, but it was called 137 Seconds, or
Hmm.
like a concept, like something between like a proof of work and decentralized computing, like generalized decentralized computing is described in that novel. So I thought that yeah, proof of work is cool, and I understand why we need proof of work for blockchain. But then having something like that super computer from Stanisław Lem novel would be also super cool. So I started experimenting with my friends. I worked back then with on that concept, and we decided that we will try to build something like that. And the name was also by Stanisław Lem's novel Golem 14, because I thought that 137 seconds is not that cool name for a project. Like a Golem is much cooler name, and Golem
I would
14
agree.
is a supercomputer from like one of the stories by Stanisław Lem. So yeah, but basically that's the story.
Okay. And you mentioned you focus your time on the foundation. Now, what's your role there?
So together with Joanna Rutkowska and Andrzej Regulski, at some point we moved to foundation to focus on things other than Golden Network, but which could be still, you know, useful for broader GLM ecosystem and Golem ecosystem, and at the same time would comply with our strong beliefs that we need like a more private world with more control of people over the digital lives. So we wanted to do more in line what we wanted to do in Golem, but probably with a little bit different technology and with different assumptions, but still with the same like a decentralized, pro freedom, pro privacy, pro user control vibe.
Okay, fair enough. You mentioned when we were chatting before we started recording Wildland. What's Wildland, and what sort of problems are you trying to solve with that?
Yeah. So Wildland is our attempt to help user with the fine full control over personal data. And by personal data, I understand like files that you normally keep on your phone or your desktop, or you upload to your like a favorite cloud storage. So with Wildland, we want user to give first ability to control the cloud storage backend where the data are stored. So basically, you do not have to buy like a storage as a service from Dropbox or Google Drive or iCloud, but you can just opt into whatever you want and then seamlessly change that to different backend if for whatever reasons the one you have like you don't
Oh,
like it
okay.
anymore. So that goes with the high abstraction of the data from the underlying infrastructure. So you can pretty easily, very easily, in fact, change the infrastructure that you have your data on, and in your file system, in like everything you have your data integrated with, that will look the same. So no broken paths, no mess with the moving data from one folder to another. Like that's like a fully under your control, which is maybe not that relevant if you just store those data somewhere. But then if those data are linked with the apps or services that way or another, that's of course quite convenient. And then with Wildland, you have your own like a layer that you fully control for sharing things and encrypting things. So for example, you can even do such magic that you can connect Dropbox to your Wildland, your private Dropbox, and then you can use Wildland to share some of your Dropbox to someone else, not using using Dropbox API for that, but
Right.
not telling Dropbox that you're sharing that content outside of your account, which is also like a
Hmm.
pretty cool and like pro privacy, because that way only you and the person you're sharing your data with knows about that, and you more or less keep your data with you. So I think that's what is really cool about Wildland. But on top of that is one more thing that I have to mention, because like we hope that over time that will something that will become the most important part of it. So we combine that with the own addressing system, which is built in quite seamlessly, so you don't really have to know much about it. But because of that its own addressing system, so that makes it quite robust and censorship resistance. But that also gives those units of data we store there. Like we call it container, but you can imagine that as a folder with some structure in it, and you can create as many paths in your file system that leads to the same container. So that gives
Okay.
you pretty powerful and integrated with your system, with your file system way of like an organizing your knowledge.
Yeah, I was just looking at the website here. You got version one of 0.1.0
Yeah,
out for Linux, Mac OS, and Windows 10. Looks like the storage backends you support now are Dropbox, Google Drive, Amazon S3, and I guess anything that's running the WebDAV
yep.
protocol. What about are you guys looking to incorporate, of course, Golem Network, because obviously that offers storage, Arweave, Saya, these other decentralized protocols as well?
So, well, Golem Network actually does not incorporate like a storage that you can use on the extended period of times.
Oh, okay.
So, as for
All right.
incorporating Golem Network, we'd rather hope that at some point when we will be also willing to process some data that are in the containers, then you could use Golem Network to have like the computing component of Wildland. But at the moment, Wildland
Okay.
is only about storing data, and that kind of storage is not provided by Golem. I think by the way, you mentioned like a couple of decentralized storage projects. So yes, of course that it can be used. I think we also have IPFS plugin
Okay.
working. Perhaps it's not used very often at the moment. This is not our main focus, but at down the road we want to, of course, support as many backends as possible, and also that will be possible for the community to write plugins for all possible backends. So basically, if you are able to store data somewhere, you should be able to tap that into Wildland.
Right. Yeah. Well, I just this is fortuitous timing. We had someone from Storage on the podcast a few months ago, and I've been meaning to at least try it out for maybe a secondary backup, um, and looking to use a centralized service at least for now as a primary backup, but I haven't done that yet, and so I'm really interested to at least try out.
Yeah.
Wildland as well. That sounds really interesting. The public forests, how do those work? You've got here on the Ariadne
Okay.
forest and the Pandora forest.
Yeah. So forest is like the namespace of the user,
Okay.
or the instance of the namespace of user. So I could create, for example, like a private forest which I use to store data I don't want to share with other people. I can create like my public forest that will be open to everyone to see. And we have like two forests now, like in the wild. And Ariadna is a forest that is open as by us as the like a I would say like the top level forest, or like a
Okay.
starting domain to get your path to other forests, so to other namespaces. So you could compare that to like the instance of the DNS to find like the other forests. And as we are early on, this is read-only access, so you cannot add your forest to our Ariadne forest. But
Right.
like in the future, perhaps that will be curated or totally open, and then everyone they can install their own like a part of internet in the Ariadne forest. And of course, like
Yeah.
the name is like because of the Ariadne in the
A reference
maze,
to Greek mythology.
yeah, of course, and finding the way in the maze. So, and then like the Pandora forest is like this demo forest where we put like some internal documents on development of Wildland, but rather the role is, of course, to give some information on where we are and what is the progress. But the main role here is to just showcase how that works. That you can mount that forest, you can see the folders, you can see how the multipaths, so this multi-categorization addressing system, how it works and how it enables you to interact with the content. So yeah, this forest is something that you can just go and see how it works. I
Yeah.
think like pretty soon, like by soon I think like this year, we will also have a web app that you will be able to see that demo forest like in your browser without installing anything on your workstation.
Cool. Yeah, that sounds exciting. What else are you working on with the foundation, or what other plans do you have for the future of the Golem Foundation?
Yeah. Uh, Maybe I'll start with the plan for the next year for Wildland, because that's
Sure.
something that is our main focus at the moment. So I do want us to have like a first like a user ready or like a production grade version of Wildland, because as you perhaps can see as you're scanning through our docs Wildland.io page at the moment, I believe this is like a what we have now has all major functions implemented,
Yeah.
but it's still pretty difficult to use. There is only command line interface. There is no marketplace implemented yet, so you cannot actually buy those storages. You have just connect them manually by yourself, and all of that we want to have next year. So first graphical interface, like a proper backends that are available off the shelf, and in general much better user experience. Along with that, of course, we want to work on something that is also part of Wildland, but has like a potential outside of Wildland as well. So this is
Okay.
like a decentralized governance that we want to use in Wildland and perhaps in other projects as well. We call that concept user-defined organization. So basically, that's a take on how you could organize DAO in a way that would solve some of the important problems that we can see now with the DAOs. So I think like the first problem that we have, and that is causing a lot of troubles, is that if you have like a direct token governance implemented, then the first problem is that there is like a huge surface of attacks because that token is tradable. So basically,
Right.
people can use different techniques to borrow the tokens, trade the tokens, do strange things, especially with the leverages that are provided with DeFi at the moment. This is like a really problematic thing. But
Yeah,
then
I've seen
even
150x leverage even on centralized exchanges.
yeah, so that happens. And then the second problem, which is a little bit less obvious, but I think is like a long term is as important as the first problem, is that the interest of token holders is not the same as interest of the platform users. So
Right.
so so somewhere down the road, even if the project with the token governance is successful, then we can be on the governance level. We can be repeating everything that is wrong with the current model, where you have a platform that works for dominance and works for the sake of this dominance, for the
Hmm.
sake of moving fast and breaking things, and not in the interest of the users. So I think that at the end of the day, the governance should be done by the users in the users' interest, and not by the token holders. And by the way, this is very very in line with my favorite definition of decentralization, which is like a decentralization is when you put the user in the center of things. You put user in control, and not any obscure centralized entity that is no one knows where. So I think the governance should be done by user, and because of that we have the central concept of proof of usage token. So basically, when you interact on Wildland marketplace, you generate some proof of usage that is a result of
Okay.
burning GLM. So at the same time, you have a sink that makes that reduces the supply of GLM. And you generate that proof of usage, and it's used as the governance token. That is not transferable, by the way. So thanks to that, we tie governance with usage, and we eliminate the trading problem. And there are many more concepts behind that user-defined organizations we have, and this is also the thing that we are very much focused at the moment. But this is like while what we do in Wildland is public already, like all the works in user-defined organizations are still not public yet, because we are in a pretty early stage still, although we have some progress.
Yeah. So it sounds like you don't want to have something similar to Synthetics' Spartan Council or even delegatees. people you can delegate your votes to, and the Gitcoin DAO, that sort of thing. You want to have
I
really almost
actually,
like reputation based, more usage you're talking about, but like
yeah,
where using the product actually generates you more voting power, I guess,
yeah,
as opposed to
that's
simply owning tokens or
that's
or or getting the confidence of others potentially.
That's exactly it. But at the same time, I'm not dismissing like things like delegation or things like quadratic voting or quadratic funding.
Hmm.
We are even like researching very actively things like proof of humanity or bright ID or other proof of uniqueness solutions.
Hmm.
So I would really love to have a system where we have user-defined organization, where you have like then every like a voting entity has its proof of uniqueness, and I don't even care if
Okay.
that's human. That can be AI as well, and
Sure.
of course that should be done in a. I think I really like how this is done by Bright ID. So this is like a really pro privacy solution. So the only thing that is told to the like organization that use that when you use Bright ID is that this is like a unique person, like unique identity, and that's exactly
Yeah.
something I would like to use in UDO. And then you can combine that with the things like delegation or with the quadratic voting. Much easier than in a situation when you don't have something like that. So I'm totally open to other things as well, and we are working on that as well.
Okay, cool. I will say from personal experience and from I know the experience of others, Bright ID from a technical perspective, especially if you uninstall the app and then try to reinstall it, there's definitely some issues there. But I think that's a Bright ID issue to handle where like you'll get an error message of like, oh, you already used this device has already been verified by another user or something
Mm-hmm.
like that. And it's like, well, yeah, it was me. I just didn't need the app for a while. And so I've reinstalled it, but there's like no backup whatsoever. There's no way for the Bright ID app to even have like a fingerprint of, oh yeah, you've done this before, or I guess a way to use iCloud or Google Drive to back up that data. So definitely still some maturity that's needed with any of those types of solutions. I've seen people have issues with IDENA, proof of humanity as well,
Yeah,
and I used to work with Bloom Protocol for several years. So Civic is out there as well. There's lots of options, but yeah, no, it's great that you're also taking into account
I
some of the stuff that's already being experimented with right now.
there is I think there is some progress now with those ID systems like that. That's something that we are talking since freaking ages now, and but
Yeah.
only I think
Yeah,
during
that's a
like
2016, 2017
yeah,
creation as well. Like
even
Civic's been around
even
forever.
earlier I think, but then I think only during the last year or two we have some real progress here, and
Hmm.
I'm becoming to be more and more optimistic about that. This problem will be solved.
Cool. Speaking of problems to be solved, you've been in the space for even longer than I have, and actually building products and coding and that sort of thing. What do you think the potential
I'm
is
not a
for?
developer myself, but
Oh, okay, sorry.
I
I'm not
help
either.
other in coding.
That's fine. I don't code, so that's no problem. I'm not a developer. But where do you think maybe the most potential lies for solving any sort of problem? Golem Network is working on sharing unused computing resources. Wildland focus on storage. We just talked about identity a bit. Where do you see maybe the next growth opportunity or the next big problem to be solved by distributed ledgers, blockchains over the next little while?
Yeah, so I think that nothing has changed in my view of that, like since I entered the space. And I still wait for that problems to be solved at scale. And I think that
Sure.
this is like a what I really hope for is a shift of power, from in a way that will really um, allow people to have more influence and how things work. And and this is exactly what we try to do with this user-defined organization. And I think also that this
Hmm.
is like what a lot of people who joined the movement in the early days, like a blockchain space in the early days, like
Yeah.
they thought that this is this um, crypto anarchism, that we will now create systems that are self-governed or governed by the wisdom of crowd, or governed however, but not by one, like a central actor who sits in the middle and takes
Right.
like a decisions, not taking account anything else. And of course, like, there is a lot of misconceptions here, and especially early blockchains implementations with a proof of work and focused on um, on the crypto assets only are incredibly far from anything like that, and they are a
Yeah.
problem with the concentration of wealth that we is not really equal on blockchains. Um, but then as I can see now, we are coming through the excitement about decentralized finances, and again, excitement around decentralized governance is growing at the moment. So I think that the next big thing is decentralized governance, and I would say at least that I
Okay.
waited for that like a quite long time. I think like what really damaged that thinking around that was everything that happened around the DAO in that was like an early 2016, not
Yeah.
early. I think it was May or June 2016, something like that.
Yeah. The DAO hack.
Yeah, which was not hacked, by the way, but yeah. So
Sure, but
and because of that, because of that, the general sentiment back then was like, oh yeah, decentralized governance is hard. We have to be like a really careful here. Which is true, by the way. But then
sure.
it's coming back, and I'm really happy about that.
Yeah. Well, and then I think not that they're not doing anything, but I think contributing to that it's really hard mantra has been things like Aragon taking a really long time,
Yeah,
to get adoption and to go from token V1 to token V2, and then of course Ethereum, gas prices going up and down significantly and pushing people off chain for off
yeah,
chain voting like Snapshot and stuff like that. And so I think it's just been this really topsy turvy um, or winding path to get to where we are now, which is almost all off-chain voting or voting on a completely different blockchain to what your product actually exists on, or like voting on XDAI, but you're actually controlling assets on Polygon or Ethereum or
yeah,
something like that. Um, to and then still iterating around
yeah.
protocol politicians or delegatees or and then your work on UDO now.
I think there is still a lot of experimenting needed here, but we can see now some like a really huge project governed in a more
Hmm.
or less decentralized way, and there is a lot to learn from there.
Yeah. So moving on from baby FOMO Doge token to actually decentralizing control and having
Yeah,
user control, or at least a say, significant vote
yeah,
in the way things go. Seen so many scams. Baby FOMO Doge this, meow cat, blah 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 token. I'm like, oh my God, stop it. Please stop it.
you know that's the space is colorful. This is good.
The colors are great. The meme, I'm totally fine with memes, right? Like that's fine if you want to make a meme, but I volunteer mod the DeFi Telegram group. It's literally just called DeFi,
Mhm.
and the number of times I need to uh, um, send a command to Protectron to report, I'm reporting
Mhm.
the latest spammy message and getting it teaching their machine learning model, which actually seems to work fairly well. Um, what's spam and what's not. Just the number that get through, and so I take a moment to read them. I'm like, it's literally just, it's not DeFi. It's literally just a token that is more or less a Ponzi scheme where they're just trying to get a bunch of people to buy in. And I'm sure the people who got in early or the founders of that new token are just going to sell and, pull the rug out and move on to the next colorful, cute dog or cat
Yeah,
related artistry. Like the art is great. Shiba Inu and some of the other dog related ones, they're super cute, and that's fine. But I'd feel much better if it existed solely as a meme as opposed to an actual smart contract and actually getting people to buy this ridiculous token on Binance Smart Chain and pumping up the price and then rug pulling. Like it's literally just a race at that time, at that point, for who can get in the earliest and then get out at as quickly as they can because they don't want to be
yeah,
left holding the bags.
yeah. I
And
totally agree with
yeah,
you, and I think in all honesty, where I can see a lot of very good use cases for NFT. I don't really understand, what's going on at the moment, but at the same time, I accept all that because that's the price of freedom. And if we are pro freedom people, then we have to accept that such things happen, and that's it. And that's also the beauty of that space. And because of that, while personally I'm very often annoyed by the things I see around, I think that the fact that we should we just pro freedom is the most important part of it. and this is true.
sure.
and
It
and,
just
and
doesn't have to be in the group that I moderate.
yeah,
you
yeah, obviously.
you can go tweet that. You can go post it anywhere else. Not where I have control.
Yeah, of course. That's
I have the freedom to get rid of it.
absolutely, absolutely. I'm only I'm only saying that space is colorful, and that's very often because there are bad actors around. But then here the freedom in that space is about that you have to protect yourself from that bad actors.
Absolutely.
With your instincts and with your intelligence, and that's it.
Yeah, yeah. The number of times I've seen people go to, a fake token site which looks nothing like the real thing, and they're like, "Oh, there's this giveaway."
Yeah,
Click, click, click. Ignore the fact that your MetaMask just told you that you're going to hand over your passphrase or your private key to this DApp. No, that's fine. I'm gonna send 1,000 and I'm gonna get 5,000 back. There's only one instance where I've seen that work, and it's not through MetaMask, it's through Signal, and it's like an actual project that's integrated with Signal, and that's the only time where right now for testing and for awareness they are airdropping tokens, but you actually need to interact via SMS essentially, text message with
yeah,
a bot that's running on Signal. That's the only time I've seen we're going to send you some, you send a little bit back, and then we'll send you back even more things sort of work. It doesn't, you got people got to pay attention, like you said, that's freedom's great, absolutely, but you also need to protect yourself, and you need to actually read the dialogue boxes that MetaMask and Trust Wallet and Coinbase Wallet and all these other wallet apps are actually showing you, because they're telling you exactly what's going to happen. And if you just ignore that and hit confirm, you know there
yeah.
goes all your ether, all your whatever else that is in there.
Obviously, but yeah, then that freedom problem, I would call it like that, goes well beyond that. So we are much better UX wise now than we were like a few years ago. But still,
Sure.
like if you really want to control things, you have to like somehow have your like a seed phrase written down somewhere and stored, or have your own recovery setups. And still, like a lot of people have problems with that, and can lose a lot of money due to the stupid mistakes. But that's also the price of freedom.
Yeah, being your own bank is not simple.
Yeah,
Or I guess I guess relatively simple. It's tedious though, because you do have to think about what happens in like a worst case scenario.
yeah,
Um, I just got myself a safety deposit box at the bank, but I haven't taken my hardware wallet there yet because I still have stuff that I might want to interact with in the nearer term, and going there would be a little inconvenient during their opening hours. So even that is not like a foolproof solution where it's like, oh, I'm going to put it in this place, and if somebody robs it, it'll be covered under insurance, blah blah blah. Yeah, but if I actually want to get it on a weekend or like on a Sunday because there's a governance vote happening or something like that, and I need that wallet, like that's incredibly inconvenient. So it's
Yeah,
not, there's lots of things to consider when you actually own the keys to the vault, even if it's a digital vault. So
exactly.
I guess maybe to that extent, like what do you have any thoughts on El Salvador, Ukraine, actually making Bitcoin legal tender? People are thinking that Afghanistan, or at least Afghanis, might ape into cryptocurrencies, whether it's Bitcoin or something else. Do you have any thoughts around some of this recent actual real world adoption?
So, I think, of course, that this is good that people have more options, and I'm absolutely sure that for some use cases, like when you have like a problems with remittance or you want to flee the country, and just memorize your seed phrase, and then be able to be refugee with all your wealth in your mind. So I can imagine like a
Yeah.
very useful use case for that. But on the other hand, I think that the countries like Salvador or Afghanistan, they have problems because they are broken states, if not fallen states, and of course this is not something you can repair with the blockchain or with the decentralized governance we mentioned. So because I think that you can use those technologies to repair some institutions or even to substitute some institutions with the new institutions. But then if your problem is that you do not have like a basic utilities provided, that there is no like a physical safety, then I
Yeah.
don't think that this is like a much of a change. So while of course that makes a good headline that Salvador now officially accepts Bitcoin, I don't think this is much of a change for the better or worse for most of the people living there.
Yeah, having Bitcoin or being able to spend Bitcoin at the store does not necessarily guarantee you indoor plumbing
Yeah,
or something like that, or safety, or safety against a cartel or something like that, which
yeah,
is a problem in a lot of Latin American countries.
yeah.
Fair enough. To that extent, how do you think blockchains can actually help uh, um, solve some of these problems, like maybe having things be more transparent across the El Salvadorian government, for example, or maybe for voting or anything else around that vein?
Yeah, I'm not expert in Salvador, so I perhaps there are some
It doesn't have to be El
perhaps
Salvador. That's fine.
perhaps
It could be
perhaps there are
Poland.
some perhaps there are some very specific use cases in Salvador with that could help. Mm, as for like a general, that's what I said. I think yeah, that help a lot with the institutions, but I think at the moment I would expect institutions rather in the private sector than in the public sector.
Hmm.
Uh, because in a public sector, you either don't really need blockchain because government wants to be some kind of central actor who controls things, and I think there are sometimes good reason for the state to still willing to do that. So they will not use blockchain; they will use something else, which will be simpler and better for that use case.
Sure.
Mm, and while I would love to see a lot of things like voting or like real estate tokenized into NFTs or things like that, or trading equities like registered official equities on blockchains, having them tokenized. I think like we are pretty far away from that. I maybe that will happen somewhere down the road, but we are pretty far away from that. And then those are not like a number one problems we have at the moment, at least not in the developed world. I think like what we have in the developed world now is the problem, in fact, with the private sector, with trust in platforms there, like, all the social media things, and unfortunately, I don't think we have like as a blockchain space or decentralized space that we have ready solutions for them. But I can see a
Hmm.
lot of discussions, a lot of thinkings, all those ideas about decoupling infrastructure layer from like a moderation layer, like introducing some kind of the governance, the user's governance to the moderation layer, to to have some mechanism designed into how content is presented, ultimately to change like underlying rules on how people monetize on that content that's
Hmm.
provided. So so I don't believe we as a space have anything that is ready to be used at the moment. But at the same time, we have tons of discussions, and I think a lot of things is going into right direction. So if the time is right at some point, so because I think we are coming closer and closer to some kind of a tipping point, or
Hmm.
like people will realize that this is really a problem, and this is really, and that how social media works, that really sucks. With every step, like a Cambridge Analytica, like every leak, every next scandal around that, we are getting closer, and I think this tipping point is getting closer and closer. And I hope that by the time that happens, we will at least have a lot of ideas, like how that could be done differently. But I'm afraid that that if we are not moving fast enough with these proposals, on monetization, on governance, on separating different layers in technology, but also organization, that some governance will come and will regulate that in a way that will make the situation even worse. That's my fear.
So are you hopeful for Blue Sky then? Twitter's initiative around this, right? Having the
This is
same base layer
this
and
is
allowing them to curate things the way they want, but Mastodon could plug in and do whatever they want.
I think this is like a really exciting. I'm not able to tell you if this will be successful or not, or if at some
Of
point
course.
Twitter will not say, but after all, we want to be in the driver's seat, and uh, but the narrative that the couple of smaller social media platforms, smaller than the biggest one, that we don't have to name probably, will
Yeah.
will will create some kind of alliance, and introduce some kind of division between the infrastructure and the moderation, and will introduce some
Right.
kind of mm, competitive transferability. I think this is something that can happen, and that would be great.
Yeah, I do remember. I'm just thinking now, um, using Mastodon for the first time and having the option. I think it was it Mastodon or Peepeth, depending on your pronunciation, where you could not only post to their platform but also tweet the same thing.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know if that was supposed to be a mechanism for people to see like, oh, you can see like the client that they're using is called PPETH or Mastodon or whatever, so I'm gonna go check that out as well as kind of like a growth hack. But I do remember that sort of thing being possible, which is a very hacky way to do that, right? Like I'm still gonna
Yeah.
post over here, but it's also gonna go back to Twitter so that I'm not losing, I guess, that audience. Um,
But then
that's
this
one
is
approach,
this
but
is just a workaround. What you really need is,
yeah.
is to just have this full transferability of that content, because thanks to that, and of course that has to go with some kind of ID, and then thanks to that, you are really able to move from one platform to another, keeping your social graph, and that's what is important, that you do not have this vendor lock-in anymore. Yeah.
Hosted by Golem Network.
Yeah, or by Wildland. But but basically, like,
Golem Network.
the idea is, of
Go
course,
ahead.
that you can use like at some point in time, not now, that you could use like a Wildland to store all those data that are used um, in your social media feed, and then you could process that using hooks that could work on a Golem network, obviously. So that then you would have like a full separation of all the layers, and perhaps you do not have to set that up yourself, but you have just a social media platform that is open and only provides you service that combine all those features and enables you to participate that there in this social media in a way you fully control. That would be great, and of course that's what we hope for. We'll think Wildland at some point may be like a great backend for apps. This is definitely like what we're working towards.
Yeah, and then I'm just thinking now it would also be nice not to have to go to Twitter and say, "Hey, give me an archive of my tweets." And a couple hours later, that zip file is finally ready. Whereas you could actually have a persistent backup that's always collecting that data, or collecting that data a couple times a day, and it's just there, as
Yeah,
opposed to
well,
having to request all all this data or all
in
this content that I posted to your platform.
this is interesting because actually you can do that. But the problem is that you cannot do much with those data because, of course,
Yeah,
there is no compatibility between the Twitter and all the other social media. So
right.
the fact that you can take those data does not mean that you can do anything with it. So this is only like a step one. And of course,
Yeah.
for you to be able to do something with them, let's face it, like those platforms have to cooperate. So they have to agree on some kind of standards on how those data is shared, or maybe they have to be forced to do that by the governments.
Which gets us back to that.
While usually I'm rather for less regulation than more regulation. I think in that particular case, like that regulation could be quite useful. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would tend to agree. I would say, as long as it's fairly light touch, in the sense that it forces them to work together, but allows Twitter, Facebook, Pinterest, whomever, to actually come together and figure out that data for themselves. Because my only worry would be, government is slow, almost necessarily so sometimes, but because they're so slow, you end up with government saying, okay, it's going to be in a JSON format and it needs to look like this. And somebody else comes along and has some really really new innovative feature that doesn't fit
Yeah.
into a JSON blob or whatever, and now we're waiting a year or two for the government to put a bill, to write something, understand the topic, write something, put the bill up for vote, you know, hearings, whatever, go through the Senate.
Yeah.
Like, you're looking at a year or two, and maybe there's an election in the meantime, which everything gets wiped away, and I know that happens. I'm pretty sure that happens in Poland too. So then you start the process all over again. So as opposed to forcing them to set up some sort of free consortium that they all need to be a part of, and just having to agree to, again, a fairly light touch standard of, like, text looks like this, images looks like this, audio looks like that, and you need to be able to egress that data and also ingress that same type of data into your platform if I want to move from, I don't know, Facebook back to MySpace, or something like that. Um, but that's the devil is always in the details there, as opposed to even the regulation.
Yeah, sure. And in all honesty, I don't know how exactly that should be implemented. Mm,
Yeah.
but I think it should be
What? But
this
that
way
I'm
or
saying we
another.
should force them to work it out. As long
Yeah.
so for me, the regulation would be, go work this out, and go
Yeah.
work it out within 6 months to a year. Like a fairly short time frame. Go work it out. Come back to us with a plan that works for everybody. And if you don't, there's going to be major penalties, right?
Yeah.
Incentivize them
If you
with
don't,
a major stick.
we'll just ban online advertisement.
Yeah. All right. You know what? Well, I've used up all your time. Julian, thanks so much for being here on Private Podcast this week. And to everybody listening, thanks for tuning in. And until next time, stay free.
Thank you very much. That was pleasure.